June 8th, 1989. A road crew worker steps into the yard of an abandoned house to lay asphalt and walks into a scene he will never be able to forget. A woman's body is lying on the ground. Her hands are tied behind her back. A black nylon stocking is wrapped tightly around her neck, and a few feet away, sprayed in orange paint across a fuel tank, someone has written, "A bastard died right here." This woman is Cindy James, a 44-year-old nurse. Almost everyone who knew her described her the same way: calm, responsible, well-liked. But the strangest part of this case isn't how she died. It's what started 7 years before it. Over those 7 years, Cindy called the police again and again. She said someone was following her, sending her letters, calling her phone, breaking into her home, and trying to kill her. The reports piled up so fast that police assigned special detectives to her case. Hundreds of hours of investigation, thousands of pages of reports. But the deeper the investigation went, the stranger the case became. Because no one could ever prove her attacker was real. And that single question turned this into one of the most baffling criminal cases in Canadian history. Was Cindy James the victim of a stalker who was never caught? Or did this whole nightmare come from somewhere no one expected? This is the case of Cindy James. To understand this case, we need to go back several years. Before the emergency calls, before the threatening letters, and long before the body found in that abandoned house. Cindy James, born Cynthia Elizabeth Hack, came into the world in 1944 in British Columbia. Her father was a retired Air Force officer, a disciplined, strict man who enforced the rules of the house without exception. But Cindy chose a different path. She became a nurse, a profession that almost everyone around her believed suited her perfectly. Calm, patient, and dependable. In 1965, she met a man 18 years older than her, Roy Makepeace, a South African psychiatrist. They married a year later. From the outside, the marriage looked completely ordinary. But those close to Cindy later said, even from the earliest days, something about it felt wrong. Makepeace was never able to obtain a medical license in Canada and eventually turned to teaching at a university. During this time, Cindy worked as a nurse at Vancouver General Hospital and later at a care facility for children with behavioral disorders. Her colleagues described her as precise, professional, and easy to get along with. But her private life told a different story. Years later, Cindy told close friends that she had experienced violence in her marriage, a claim her ex-husband never fully accepted. He only admitted to a few limited incidents. In the spring of 1982, the marriage came to an end. For Cindy, the divorce was supposed to be the beginning of a new life. But just a few months later, September 1982. Only a few months had passed since Cindy's separation when the first phone call came in. On the other end of the line, a calm but threatening voice said, "I'll At first, she thought it might just be a prank caller. But the calls didn't stop. Each one with a fresh threat. Each one the same voice. Cindy reported it to the police, but strangely, sometimes just minutes after the officers left, the phone would ring again, as if someone was watching every move made in and out of that house. After the calls, it was the house itself that came under attack. The porch lights were smashed. Someone broke in, but took nothing. The only thing they did was slash a pillow on Cindy's bed. It felt less like a robbery and more like a message. Naturally, the first suspect was her ex-husband, Roy Makepeace, but he denied any involvement. Around this same time, something else happened. Something that would later cast doubt over the entire investigation. The officer assigned to Cindy's case, Patrick McBride, grew close to her. A romantic relationship formed between the two, one that lasted about a year. Something that would later raise serious questions about the impartiality of the investigation. But the harassment continued, and this time it wasn't limited to phone calls or break-ins. January 1983, one of Cindy's friends found her unconscious in the backyard. A nylon stocking was tied tightly around her neck. When she regained consciousness, she said 2 men had attacked her, but the medical examination could not find conclusive evidence to confirm her account. From that point on, Cindy's life became a series of escapes. She changed houses. She changed her phone number. But the threats always seemed to arrive before she did. Anonymous letters, calls in the middle of the night. And even the discovery of strangled cats in her yard. Each incident made the fear feel more real. January 1984, another incident occurred. The private investigator hired to protect her found her unconscious. A knife had been driven straight through her hand. Beside her lay a note, its letters cut from a magazine. It read only one sentence: "Now you must die." There was a mark on Cindy's arm that looked like a needle puncture. But the blood test showed no trace of any sedative. The deeper the case went, the more questions it raised. Even Makepeace himself offered an unexpected theory. He claimed organized crime groups might be behind it, but no evidence ever supported that theory. That summer, the intensity of the incidents rose again. Cindy's dog was found injured. 2 men, posing as police officers, tried to force her into a car. And sometime later, in Dunbar Park, she was found unconscious once more. Again, with the same nylon stocking around her neck. But perhaps the strangest part of this case wasn't the attacks at all. It was what Cindy said afterward.
He killed them.
During hypnotherapy sessions, she claimed that years earlier, she had witnessed her ex-husband murder 2 people and dismember their bodies. A shocking claim.
This case is really confusing.
But police found no trace of any such crime. Even Cindy's sister, who she said had been on that same trip, said she remembered nothing unusual at all. The line between reality and the mind was growing blurrier by the day. A few months later, Cindy was hospitalized in a psychiatric ward after an overdose. Doctors noted signs of severe depression and chronic anxiety, but no one could say for certain whether this was the result of years of being stalked or whether the stalking itself had its roots in that same psychological crisis. One psychologist who interviewed her later said something that is still quoted in nearly every account of this case. This woman was under siege, from inside or from outside. She was living a real nightmare. Despite everything, the nightmare still wasn't over. By the end of that year, Cindy was found semi-conscious once again. Once again, a nylon stocking around her neck. She even changed her last name, hoping to start a new life. But nothing stopped the unknown stalker. In 1986, another fire broke out in her home. The phone line had been cut. And once again, she spent several weeks in a psychiatric hospital. Sometime later, she told her father she had been hiding a truth from everyone. She said she knew who was responsible. But she never spoke that name out loud. Before we go any further, if you're the kind of person who gets drawn into stories like this, if unsolved cases, cold files, and real crimes keep you up at night, then this channel was made for you. Every week, a new case. Every week, the full story. Hit subscribe right now. The button is right below this video. Don't miss what's coming next. Now, let's get back to it. 1987. Cindy began working at Richmond General Hospital. Maybe she believed that with a fresh start, she could finally leave the past behind. But the pattern didn't change. Windows were broken, light bulbs were loosened, and every so often, there were signs someone unknown had gotten inside, without taking a single thing. October 1988, something strange happened. On her ex-husband's answering machine, several threatening messages were recorded. Messages that, by all accounts, carried that same familiar voice. But Makepeace didn't hand them over to the police. He gave them directly to his lawyer. 15 days later, Cindy was found again. This time in the garage, unconscious. Her hands and feet were bound, and that same nylon stocking was around her neck once more. A knot expert who later examined the scene said it seemed highly unlikely someone could tie those knots on themselves. But even that expert opinion couldn't bring the case any closer to an answer. By that point, police had spent nearly $1.5 million investigating Cindy's complaints. Hundreds of hours of interrogation, dozens of suspects, years of surveillance, and still not a single piece of solid evidence showing who the attacker really was. Among some of the officers, a question was slowly starting to take shape. Had they spent years chasing an unknown criminal? Or had they been pulled into a story whose real answer lay somewhere else entirely? May 15th, 1989. Less than 2 weeks remained before this case would enter its final and most mysterious chapter. May 25th, 1989. The day began completely normally. Cindy showed up for work as usual. Her co-workers later said nothing about her seemed out of the ordinary. After her shift ended, she went out to run some errands. And then she vanished. That night, several of her friends went to her house for their usual game of bridge. The lights were off, the doors were locked, and her car wasn't there. The search began almost immediately. A few hours later, her car was found in a shopping center parking lot, abandoned. There were bloodstains on the driver's side door. Her groceries were still inside the car. A birthday gift she'd bought sat untouched on the seat. But the contents of her purse were scattered under the vehicle, as if someone had deliberately dumped them onto the ground. Police also searched Cindy's house. Everything was in order. There were no signs of a struggle, no signs of forced entry either. A full search operation was launched. The Coast Guard combed the rivers and waters around Georgia Strait. Volunteers searched parks and forests. But of Cindy, there was no trace at all. 1 day passed, then 2, then 13. It was as if she had vanished from the earth without leaving a single footprint behind. Cindy's death, instead of closing this case, only made it more complicated. In the spring of 1990, the official coroner's inquest began. 40 days of hearings, more than 80 witnesses, one of the most expensive inquiries in the history of British Columbia. During these hearings, nearly every theory imaginable was put forward. Roy Makepeace, Cindy's ex-husband, turned suspicion onto her own family. In response, the family said that after Cindy's death, they had found a large amount of sedatives and medical supplies in her home. The psychiatrists didn't agree with each other either. Some believed she was struggling with personality disorders and severe psychological trauma. Others insisted that those struggles alone couldn't explain everything that had happened over the past 7 years. One of the most pivotal moments in the inquest came when the knot expert challenged a theory that had long been considered impossible. He demonstrated that, technically, a person could tie themselves into almost the exact position Cindy had been found in. That demonstration threw the entire case back to square one. A killer? Or Cindy herself? In the end, the inquiry could not accept any single theory with certainty. On May 25, 1990, exactly 1 year after she vanished, the official verdict was announced. Just 2 words. Unknown event. Not murder, not suicide, not an accident. Just an unknown event. The case of Cindy James very quickly reached far beyond Canada's borders. Television specials, books, and multiple documentaries all tried to solve this mystery. But even after decades, no explanation has ever managed to fit all the pieces of this puzzle together. Was Cindy really stalked by an unknown person for 7 years? If she was, how was not a single piece of solid evidence about that attacker ever found? And if all of this came from her own mind, then how were the injuries, the knots, the scenes, things even some experts called nearly impossible, how were they ever created? Maybe the truth isn't in either of those 2 stories. Maybe it's hidden somewhere in between, a place where no witness is left to tell it. The only thing we know for certain is this. A woman named Cindy James spent years talking about a fear that no one else could see. And in the end, that same fear is what led to her death. The case was closed, but the real question is still unanswered. Who killed Cindy James? Or was there ever anyone there at all? Before you leave, subscribe for more true crime and mystery stories. And if you have a theory, a question, or a case you'd like us to cover next, leave it in the comments. I read every single one. See you in the next case.